Okay, next up, we're talking about something that Rachel was talking about there is about the placement, where you put your ads. You know, not just in terms of media, but in terms of the context of the sites as well. And publishers have an enormous impact on the attention that advertising receives. And making sure that you advertise within quality environments is a key bit of advice that we give to our clients at Lumen. So we're really pleased that we've got Jack Green from Wunderkind, and Alex Kirby from HELLO magazine to come and talk about the Attention-pocalypse and why quality media is so important. So over to you guys, Alex and Jack. A round of applause, shall we?
Hello.
It's like a silent disco Glasto set here. It's really weird looking at you all. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Jack and look after Wunderkind's publisher relationships. And I'm delighted to be joined by the one and only Alex Kirby, who heads up revenue operations for HELLO magazine. So today we're going to do a quick session, picking Alex's brains about attention and why it should be a question that's not just asked by advertisers, but by publishers as well. So to kick us off, Alex, why is attention important to you at HELLO?
Well, firstly, thank you, Jack, for having me here. It's a great opportunity to come and talk about this. So I think attention is important, well, for a variety of reasons. It's obviously been a pretty big buzzword in the industry for a few years now. I think attention allows us to try and remember a little bit of what we're really trying to do. I think in this slightly complicated, fragmented market, it's sometimes quite difficult to really focus in on what is it that we're trying to do. Obviously, in any business, there's a huge amount of competing priorities, but really, fundamentally, nothing in media has changed. We are still trying to get really, really great engaging content in front of our users. Now, what has changed is how do we do that, and what is the best way to facilitate that? The way that we engage content has changed massively. We've gone from print to desktop, which is large real estate, to pretty much most of us, I know I do, look at content on our phones. Tiny, tiny little screen with lots of competing things. As well as that, the different things that need to go on any modern media page, there's a lot, right? So not only first you get in, you've got your CMP and your consent. Then you go in, you've got your content, you've got some images, you've probably got a podcast link, some social links, maybe a video, subscriptions, login. Then, you know, you've got some ads, and everyone in the business is trying to push their little bit, right? What is it that the users come to us for? And I think attention is the thing that reminds us of that. The users come to us for our content. How we do that and how we make sure that we get that content in front of someone is what we're trying to achieve. Attention then becomes, I hesitate to use the word metric because sometimes that has slightly different connotations, but attention becomes a way of us being able to refocus in on what our users enjoy, what they like. We might look at time on page, bounce rate, re-engagement, how many different articles people are looking at. And sometimes we then have to kind of try and bring all of that information together and work out how do we best serve that content and those pages in a slightly more sophisticated way, whilst also creating a really amazing ad experience, because at the end of the day, we always remember we have an ad-funded business model. So it's really complicated, actually, to be a modern media publisher nowadays, as I think a lot of people here probably recognize. But attention and being able to refocus in on those core metrics really helps us kind of just make sure that we're remembering what it is that we're really trying to do.
Yeah, and that, like what you were talking about there about making money, obviously that's why we're all here. And it kind of leads me on to my next question about how does HELLO strike a balance between UX and ultimately making money?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to do all the time. I mean, as I said, there's a lot of different competing factors, and we've all had those meetings, I'm sure, in our respective organizations where everyone's trying to push a slightly different thing. Everyone comes at it with a slightly different view. There's always been that historical tension between, say, editorial and UX and ads. I think we're in a slightly better place with it now, especially at Hello. But how do we approach this? Well, we try and remember those core principles. We try and be a user-led and a content-led business first and foremost, whilst also remembering that we have to have all of the other things on the page, and including ads. So what we do is we will make sure that any really big, rich user formats, especially if they're new formats, we go through a sign-off process. So I can't, sometimes it's a bit frustrating, but I can't do whatever I want on the page.
I've also been through that sign-off stage, and it's
it's
long.
thorough. So we'll have a sign-off system with editorial, with UX, with SEO. We'll make sure the commercial teams are happy with it. And obviously we have to have something that is engaging for our users. And we will have a constant feedback process as well, utilizing various different analytics tools and things like that we have on the page to make sure that those formats are not negatively impacting. Because with all the will in the world, you can get a campaign and you'd be like, great, I've got that check signed. But if it's annoying your users and they're not returning, that's not a good thing. And whilst one box is ticked in one revenue line, it's not a positive thing for the whole business. And so you have to really break down those silos, which isn't an easy thing to do, but you have to recognize that sometimes you might say no to something, which from a commercial perspective, who says no, right? You don't do that. But sometimes you have to recognize for the greater good or for the health of the website and the health of that readership that you do have to make sure that you're building that holistic balance. One of the things that we're really trying to do, and we haven't got there yet, but it's really part of the focus, is the holy grail is the single customer view, right? So being able to understand every single user that comes to your site, who are they? What are they interested in? What type of formats do they engage in? What type of content do they engage in? Are they a subscriber? This is much easier to do on a single brand. I remember working for previous publishers who have multi-brand. It's much harder to do. On a single brand site, you can have that understanding a lot more. So on a basic level, if someone is a subscriber, don't serve them the subscription widget. Simple as that. Gets a little bit complicated sometimes when actually half of your content on your page is hard-coded in, half of it's ad-served, and then balancing that and the technical difficulties around that. But being able to really understand those users and being able to format the page and have data and intelligence behind the way that you serve your pages means that you can strike that really good balance.
Yeah, so sort of using technology to understand user behavior, user loyalty, and then eventually getting to the point where you're showing a different experience to every single user depending on how loyal they are to your brand.
Yeah, so it could be loyalty. It could also be being more forthright with what different content you're serving them.
Yeah.
So if someone comes and they're only engaging with one type of content, you might push more of that in order to keep their attention, to be like, well, you've looked at this type of page, let's serve you more. So then you get that higher loyalty because they're circling through the site a bit more. It could also be, as I mentioned, around all of the different slots on the page, be it video, podcast, anything like that, being able to be a bit more intelligent with how you do that. Maybe you'd swap that out for an ad slot or just, all of those types of things.
Okay. And then just to follow on from that and thinking about high impact formats outside of just UX, what other factors are really important for publishers to consider when obviously looking at these different vendors?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's quite a thorough sign-off for really rich media, for new rich media formats that we do. So we do have to consider some external factors when it comes to what we will run on the page.
Yeah.
So at a basic level, you might look at your ad to content ratio. So there's your Lighthouse scores. I think everyone's probably looked at those. We know that Google deranks you if you have a higher ad density than 30%. Now, I kind of hate that they have that power, but we all know that they do. But philosophically, that's a really good metric to work by because, we've all been on websites that have got too high an ad ratio and it's annoying, right? You get annoyed, you don't want to go back and you keep that bad perception in your mind. And especially as Hello Heritage brand, we never want to have that perception. So we do really try and strike that balance. That might mean that there are certain things that we keep direct only so we can control it. Again, you have to have that conversation around, we can make money if we stick a programmatic format in that does this big, shiny song and dance over here, but I have a lot less control over that. And so you might do it sometimes, you might not. You have to be able to kind of balance those different things against each other. So we try and hit, all of the kind of industry standards for ad delivery. There's Coalition for Better Ads is a really good one to work by. And generally, our SEO team won't let us do anything that is too intrusive on the page because we know that it's going to have a negative impact on the audience.
Yeah, totally. I remember the first question you asked me when we were talking about onboarding Wunderkind was, are you better Coalition for Better Ads compliant? So yeah, and that's something that we hear all the time at Wunderkind as well. Leading on to my next question, do you feel a sort of standardized attention metric would be a positive thing for publishers?
I go back and forth on this one actually quite a lot, so I don't really have a straight answer. What I will say is standardization is really good in some ways, especially if you're thinking about programmatic and how to make things scalable. I think that being able to accurately judge to a single standard, whatever that standard is, means that we are essentially judged to the same standard amongst other publishers. What I will say as well is a lot of the time that standardization happens, metric standardization happens, and something becomes tradable as a metric, can be really great in some ways, but can also often be used to squeeze the margins of publishers further. So this happened a lot with viewability. Now, I can completely appreciate advertisers saying, why should we pay for ads that are not viewed? Completely get that, and I think we've all moved past that conversation from like 5 years ago. However, as publishers, it is sometimes harder and harder. We have been squeezed in various different ways. And so what you've ended up in a system, you ended up in a situation where we could monetize 100% of the site. Now we're in a situation where we can monetize 70% of it. Yep. So I would be loath to, now what I will say is that's not necessarily a problem if that value for those ads is coming through. But it's not always happening like that in the commoditized trading way that we tend to do a lot of advertising nowadays. So I would be loath to push for a metric that would end up not necessarily being great for publishers as a whole, because it would just be another way to squeeze those margins further. What I will also say is what sometimes isn't always appreciated about tracking technologies and various things is the difficulties getting that tracking done on a publisher page. So a lot of the time you might have something being served through a tag. Not to say that this is what would happen, but if you have too much heavy loading tech in a tag, it can cause problems on your page, it can cause slow loading ads, things like that. So what you end up is a situation is by tracking something, you're actually contributing to the problem that you're trying to solve. As well as that, a lot of really good attention tracking is done through eye tracking that can be panel-based and modeled. Not really sure exactly how that would be facilitated into, for example, a standardized metric. So again, bit of a wishy-washy answer. Some of it really good. Some of it I'm a little bit hesitant about. But I think that if we can all kind of figure out a really good system that balances that, that's great. The one other thing I would say is as publishers, we can make sure that we're giving a lot of good advice about, okay, you've got this particular campaign, put it on this particular inventory, it's contextually relevant, that person's going to be far more engaged. But so much of it is about the creative itself, which we don't necessarily have control over. So I'd say that anything around standardization there also has to come with, and maybe AI is the thing that facilitates this or anything else, but like some really good creative optimization as well. Because it's all well and good me being judged on a standard, but if it's a bit of a rubbish creative, honestly, I can't really do much with that. So that's the difficulties, I think, that will come from that standardization. But it's not necessarily to say that it's inherently a bad thing. It's just how it happens is the thing that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, there's so many factors that come into attention, isn't there? It's not just a format, it's also the targeting, it's also the creative. It can be a multitude of things. And also we don't want another stick to beat down publishers with. Okay, and then just sort of completely shameless plug here. why are solutions like Wunderkinds important to Hello Magazine?
We don't mind the shameless plug, but one of the reasons we really like the Wunderkind formats is they are specifically designed to be engaged by users when they have finished engaging with the content. And I think it's as simple as that. It does not interrupt the flow of that read. And obviously an incremental revenue stream for us, which is great, good, solid formats, but not getting in the way of that core principle that I mentioned, which is getting really engaging content that people want to read in front of our users.
Yeah, totally. I think it comes back to what we spoke about in our first ever meeting, which is users go to Hello to look at content. They don't go to Hello to look at ads. So why would you show an ad at the start of their session? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone, for listening to us.
Thank
we
you.
are at that picnic bench just behind us if you want to come and find out more.
Thank you very much.